So welcome to Candle's Holocaust Museum and Education Center's Be the Change speaker series. My name is Leah Simpson and I am the Education Director for Candles. Thank you for choosing to spend part of your Sunday afternoon with the museum. Candles is Indiana's only Holocaust museum and was founded by Eva Kor of blessed memory in 1995. Eva was a child survivor of Mengele's twin experiments. Candles contributes to the empowerment of the world through hope, healing, respect, and responsibility by shining a light on the story of the Holocaust, Eva Kor, the Mengele twins, and other survivors. Today's presentation is a discussion with Sylvia Foti about her latest book, The Nazis' Granddaughter: How I Discovered My Grandfather Was a War Criminal. Sylvia is an award-winning investigative journalist in Chicago and a high school literature teacher. She holds a master's degree in journalism, education, and creative nonfiction. Today, she shares her very personal journey that by keeping a promise to her mother, she unearthed Holocaust denial and exposed a cover-up by the Lithuanian government. There will be a question and answer session following the presentation, so please use the Q&A tab to ask your questions. So please join me in welcoming Sylvia.
Thank you, Leah. I'm very happy to be here. I am broadcasting from Chicago, so not too far away. I'm going to try to share my screen and get this going. So here we go. Nope. Doesn't want to. That's odd. All right, well, we'll do it this way then. Okay. So this is the Nazis' Granddaughter: How I Discovered My Grandfather Was a War Criminal. And I thought I would start with talking about Lithuania, just to kind of situate where we are. You can see it's a country in Europe, surrounded by Latvia, Belarus, Poland. You can see Russia to the east, and you can see Germany to the west. And then here's a little bit about the history of Lithuania. It started at about 1000 AD. It has been occupied by Polish, Russians, and Germans for centuries. It became a democratic state in 1918. Then it had 22 years of freedom. And then in 1940, which is basically when my book really begins to investigate World War II, Soviet occupation, 1940, then the Nazis came in 1941, and then again the Soviets came in 1944 and stayed there until 1990. And then Lithuania again became free in 1990, and it's had 32 years of freedom. I grew up in Market Park, Chicago, Little Lithuania. I went to kindergarten not speaking English because my parents only spoke Lithuanian in the home. Many of my friends were Lithuanian. Most of the adults in my life were Lithuanian. And I just share this to kind of explain sort of this insulated bubble that I grew up in Chicago, even though it was the United States. Just a little bit of background of the Holocaust in Lithuania before I get into my own personal story. It started June 22nd, 1941, when the Nazis invaded Lithuania, and that was known as Operation Barbarossa. At that point, Lithuania had about 200,000 Jews, and Lithuania has the terrible distinction of having murdered 96.4% of Jews, which is the highest percentage in all of Europe. So if you were Jewish, you had a 3% chance of surviving in Lithuania, which was worse than even in Germany. Most Jews were killed by December 1941. It was a very personal style of killing by bullets. And there are 200 death pits of Jews in Lithuania. Lithuania is a small country about the size of the state of Virginia. I grew up hearing about Lithuanian anti-Nazi resistance, and yet when I began research on this book, I had learned that there were only about 600 to 1,000 Nazis in Lithuania during the Nazi occupation. I had learned that Lithuanians had guns, there was a sizable militia there, and that despite all that, not a single Nazi was killed, and yet 200,000 Jews were killed by bullets. So here's a brief bio of my grandfather, Jonas Noreka. I grew up looking up to him, worshiping him. All I knew was that he was a hero. He died in a KGB prison in 1947 at the age of 36. He was killed there. He was tortured there. He was interrogated there. He was there for about a year. He was captured in 1946 by the KGB because he was trying to lead a rebellion against the Soviets. He was trying to organize all the Lithuanian partisans in one group, and then everybody would kind of join in an effort to overthrow the Soviets. It did not work, and that's how he got captured. Somebody betrayed him, and then he got captured by the KGB. So the ending of his life was very dramatic, and he did die a martyr fighting for Lithuania's freedom. Before that, he was in a Nazi concentration camp for almost 2 years, and I was told it was because he tried to save Jews. Before that, he was head of the Šiauliai district from 1941 to 1943, and at this time, this was during the Nazi occupation. Before that, during the first Soviet occupation, he led an uprising against the Soviets in 1941 in northwestern part of Lithuania called Žemaitija, or the lowlands, and he won. So as a result of him fighting so bravely against the Soviets, he has a school and streets named after him. He has a plaque on a famous building in Vilnius, and his role in the Holocaust has been completely covered up. This is a portrait that I grew up looking at all the time. It was in black and white. It was just recently colorized. And, you know, I think that his looks may have contributed to the deception of his role in the Holocaust, partly because people have this idea that very good-looking people are not evil and they could not possibly be villains. And having worked on this book for over 20 years and having been staring at this photograph of him almost every day of my life, this thought occurred to me that there is a bias for good-looking people, and I wonder if that played a role in it. And my grandmother always said that when she married him partly because he looked like a Hollywood movie star. So I just share that with you. In 1997, this is a picture of my mom receiving the Cross of the Vytis from President Algirdas Brazauskas. And this is the highest honor anyone can receive posthumously. And I'm here in the middle with my brother, and there's our mother. And this was a very proud moment in our family. At this point, all I knew was this heroic side of him. And by this point, he had the school named after him and a few streets named after him. So again, we were very, very proud. So 3 years later, my mom was on her deathbed in January 2000. And I grew up always watching her work on this book about her father. This was going to be her project. And she had been asked by the Lithuanian community here in Chicago to write the definitive biography of her father. Um, she was 60 years old in the year 2000, so very young. And none of us expected her, to take a turn for the worst, but she did. And that's when she called me to her bedside and took my hand and just said, Sylvia, you have to write the book. Everybody's expecting it. So at that time, I was a full-time journalist, and I said yes. And that was the last day of her consciousness. After that, she did go into a coma for 2 weeks, and then she died on February 4th, 2000. Of course, we were all devastated. We were not prepared for her death. It came rather suddenly and unexpectedly. She just got really sick really fast. And shortly after that, I started bringing back to my home all the material that she had collected on her father. It included 3,000 pages of KGB transcripts from when he was interrogated and tortured in that KGB prison. He wrote 77 letters to my grandmother from that Stutthof concentration camp. He wrote a little fairy tale to my mom from that Stutthof concentration camp. These 3 bookshelves behind me is her archive that I had brought over. This is a picture of my grandmother and her husband, Jonas Noreka. I think this is shortly before they got married. One of my favorite pictures. They're horsing around in Lithuania, and somebody captured this photo. Anyway, my grandmother survived my mom by 5 months. And so now we're in July 2000, and my grandmother had another heart attack, and now she was dying, and she calls me over to her deathbed, and she says, Sylvia, how's the book going? And I said, oh, it's fine. I'm going to get it done. I'm not going to let it go the way mom did. And, I'm young. At that time, I was 38 years old. And I was trying to give her words of comfort. And instead, she says, don't write the book. There's no need to dig around. Just let history lie. And of course, at that time, I had no idea why she would have said something like that. And at that time, I was still very naive about, his role in the Holocaust. And I just thought she was trying to give me a pass on writing on this book because my mom had been rather stressed out about it. So I thought she was just trying to give me a pass. And I said to her, there's no way I'm going to let this go. Of course, I have to write the book. I promised mom I would write the book on her deathbed, and I already made that promise. So there's no way I'm not going to write the book. And she didn't like my answer, and she just kind of rolled over and faced the wall and gave me her back. And that was the end of that conversation. And I just took it as her being tired, and that was it. And shortly after that, she did die. So both of them, my mom and grandmother, wanted to be buried in Lithuania, and we're still in the year 2000. And my brother and I decided to bury them on October 8th, 2000, because that would have been the 90-year memorial birthday of Jonas Noreka. And it was a rather grand funeral. Lots of people came, including this Vytautas Landsbergis, who was like Lithuania's first president after independence in 1990. He had led the movement for Lithuania's freedom from Lithuania, and a rather large public figure in Lithuania. And we were very, very honored that he came. Right after that, after the funeral, we took a walk to this building in Lithuania. It's called the Wróblewski Library, and it has like 6 streets intersecting it in a very famous intersection in Lithuania, in Vilnius, which is the capital of Lithuania. And just before our arrival in October 2000, a colleague of my grandfather had got this plaque up on this building. And in 1940s, the building was called the Academy of Sciences. And this was when my grandfather was trying to lead that rebellion against the Soviets just before he was captured by the KGB. So he was a lawyer at the time, and he was working as a lawyer in this building. And the plaque says, in this building, 1945 to 1946, worked a noteworthy resistor, Lithuania's National Council, Lithuania's Armed Forces organizer and leader, Jonas Noreika, General Storm, shot February 26, 1947. In 1945, he called himself General Storm. That was his code name that he gave himself as he was trying to lead all the partisans to fight against the Soviets. He had really just only been a captain in the Lithuanian army, but because he was leading this effort, he just gave himself the code name General Storm. So anyway, after we finished the funeral and saw that plaque, the next day my brother and I were invited to the Jonas Noreika Grammar School. And it's in Shukone, and it's about a 2-3 hour drive from Vilnius. And you could see the school here, picture on the left. And in the middle here, it says J. Noreika's Gimtinė, or the birthplace of J. Noreika, 1 kilometer away. So you can see this is kind of a little bit of a tourist attraction. And on the right, there's another plaque to my grandfather. It's about 1 or 2 blocks away from this building. And this is where I finally first heard the rumor about my grandfather. And I thought I would read an excerpt from the book on it. So I'm going to turn to page 61. And just read you a little excerpt from the book, because this is the first time in my life that I finally heard that my grandfather was involved in killing Jews, and I was really shocked. So this is chapter 8, A Tarnished Halo. My brother and I were delighted to arrive at the Jonas Noreika Grammar School. It was a modest white brick building with oak trim. Hundreds of children must have run through its halls and sat in its classrooms, learning about my grandfather's World War II exploits as we had done at our grandmother's feet. Viktoras Ashmanskas, imposing in his decorated Lithuanian Air Force uniform, had arranged for our welcome as honorary guests. We had been asked to distribute prizes to the winners of the student races held to mark our grandfather's 90th birthday. The school director, Boleslovas Talat-Kelpsha, a stout man with disheveled white hair, grasped our hands energetically, saying how pleased he was that we had come to host the ceremony. At his direction, the students, holding flowers, lined the halls to greet us as we entered the building. Talat-Kelpsha offered us frothy mugs of beer. We could hardly refuse, though it was not yet noon. Ray and I were led to his office, where he proudly showed us a thick scrapbook filled with articles about our illustrious ancestor. Many of the clippings included the familiar photograph of Jonas Noreika arrayed in his military uniform. We had seen this picture every day of our childhoods. I set down my beer to flip through the album's pages. The headlines were repetitive. Generolas Vetra. I want to die on February 16th. In memory of Generolas Vetra. A monument will stand in Shukone. The director, secretaries, teachers, and children all looked on as Ray and I perused the book. Our mother had similar scrapbooks of our grandfather, I told the director in our native tongue. He patted me on the back. I can imagine. I heard you are writing a book on Jonas Noreika, that you have taken over the task from your mother. How wonderful. How did you decide to name the school after him? I asked. He stroked his chin and answered. It was during a meeting of the county board. We wanted to pick a new name to replace the Russian one. Your grandfather's name surfaced immediately. Then abruptly, he pulled me and my brother aside. Lowering his voice, he confided, I got a lot of grief at first when we picked his name. The comment perplexed me, but all eyes were still upon me as if I were a great celebrity. I struggled to conceal my confusion. He was accused of being a Jew killer, whispered the director. My eyes met Ray's. He too was aghast. Accused of being a Jew killer? What could the director mean? Had we heard correctly? I studied his face for a moment, feeling off balance, then looked around the room at the teachers and others assembled. Who were all these people? And who was I? Or my mother? Or my grandmother? Or my grandfather? My mind whirled in disbelief. There must be some mistake. It can't be true. The school director was still talking to me, but I couldn't hear him. I felt as if he were speaking from the other side of a long and winding tunnel. He clearly expected a response from me, but I was at a loss for words, or even for thought. I didn't want to have a conversation about the possibility that my grandfather was a Jew killer. I felt as if my brain were doing somersaults. As my legs seemed about to buckle, I grabbed a chair and plopped down heavily, breathing deeply to stop my heart from sprinting, every nerve in my body at military attention. The director stroked my arm reassuringly. I'm getting more support now than ever from the Lithuanians for choosing your grandfather's name. Everything is fine now. All of that is in the past. Just communist propaganda. We're so happy you and your brother have come to help celebrate the Olympiad. I stammered an inane reply. I wanted him to stop talking, to take back what he had said. I wanted never to have heard it. Why would he say such a thing? My mother and grandmother had never mentioned any such accusation, nor had anyone else I knew. My legendary grandfather was part of my identity, my DNA. I felt such shame at hearing him accused of being a Jew killer, shame I didn't want to face. My grandfather was a hero. He was. Feeling lost, I couldn't wait for the ceremony to end. So that was the moment that I first heard this crazy rumor about my grandfather involved in killing Jews. And I was completely and totally unprepared for it. So then I went back to Chicago and, I talked to my father and other members here of the Lithuanian community. I'm like, have you ever heard this crazy rumor of Jonas Noreika killing Jews? And to my shock, they all said yes, they had heard it. And I said, how come nobody ever told me about it? And they're like, well, it was just communist propaganda. It's not true. The Russians just don't want Lithuania to have any heroes. Now that Lithuania is free, they're making everything up. So, being a Lithuanian in Chicago, I did what everybody else did here, and I went into denial, just like everyone else. But because I was a journalist and because I was tasked with writing the story, I was already sort of telling myself that I'm going to have to address this rumor in one way or another. I can't ignore it as a journalist. I'm going to have to address it. And this gave me the push sort of to at least look at that Nazi occupation. And I was already sort of fantasizing that I was going to be able to exonerate Jonas Noreika and put the rumor to rest once and for all. So I was going through all of this material very slowly. I was working full-time as a journalist. I had 2 young children, and this project was completely something, on the side, even though it was consuming a lot of my free time. And it finally got to the point where I decided to become a high school teacher so that I would have my summers off to write this book. And that's what I did. During this time, I did go through all the material that my mom had left me, and I noticed that more than 95% of all this material had to do with the Soviet occupation, that there was almost nothing there on the Nazi occupation. And this is very telling, just in general, of the Lithuanians. They really spend most of their time talking about the Soviet occupation, and very little time is devoted to the Nazi occupation. So, one of the things that I found in my mom's archive is this booklet called Pakelk Galva Lietuvi, or Raise Your Head Lithuanian. And it's a really short thing. It's just 32 pages. And when I first came across it, I thought it was like going to be something patriotic about how wonderful it is to be Lithuanian, because Lithuanians read a lot of that. And I really noticed that it was not like that at all. And the title means Raise Your Head Lithuanian. It was written by my grandfather in 1933. at the age of 22. And to my shock, it really was a very, very, very anti-Semitic document. He essentially was calling for the boycott of anything made by Jews, that Lithuania was for Lithuanians, and that the Jews are the foreigners. And I've got some excerpts, quotes from the book. It's 32 pages, and I just picked 4 quotes rather randomly to kind of share what's in here. And, one quote is, Jews in nice clothes sit in cafes thinking how to extract from us as much money as possible. The Jew gives you to earn, but he will find an opportunity to steal from you 3 times more. Once and forever, do not buy anything from the Jews. Remember, when you sell a big thing to a Jew, you are doing harm. You are harming your brother, an ethnic Lithuanian. If all ethnic Lithuanians had an agreement to boycott the Jew, the life would be much better. Yes, yes, indeed. So this little booklet, it is like Lithuania's little Mein Kampf. He wrote it 7 years after Hitler wrote Mein Kampf. So I am sure my grandfather must have read, Hitler's Mein Kampf. And I wanted to burn this thing as his granddaughter, and as a journalist, I was really upset because I realized that this is going to make it much more difficult to exonerate my grandfather. This was really primary source document evidence that my grandfather really did harbor a lot of anti-Semitism in his heart, which I believe was very common at the time. He obviously was not the only one who thought this way. The only little sliver of hope I had still as a journalist was that he did not call for the killing of Jews and that he was only 22. And so I thought, this doesn't really prove that he played a role in the Holocaust yet, that he wanted to kill Jews. So I still had a tiny bit of hope. But all of that was dashed when I came across this document that he wrote on August 22nd, 1941. And this was already during the Nazi occupation. And this was when he was chair of the Cholet region during the Nazi occupation. He was essentially the highest ranking Lithuanian in that Cholet region, which was the 2nd largest region in Lithuania at that time. And under a Nazi. So this document completely changed me. And after I took in what this document said and the repercussions from what happened to this document, this is the document that finally changed my mind of what was going on with my grandfather. And so it was so instrumental to me that I'm just going to read it because it's a very important document. And I reproduced it on page 109 in my book. So he writes, to Cholet City and County Governor, August 22nd, 1941, number 962. To all chiefs of principalities of the Cholet County and burgomaster of secondary towns, copy for police precinct chief. By decree of Cholet District Commissioner, all citizens of Jewish ethnicity, including half-Jews, must be removed from all principalities and towns of the county and settled in one district, the ghetto. All Jewish property must be preserved and accounted for by municipalities. In accordance with this decree, 1, Jews of all principalities, secondary towns, and townships must be moved to the town of Żagaje in the period of the 25th to the 29th of this month. Requisites for resettlement will be provided by respective municipalities. 2, lists of abandoned Jewish property must be delivered to me in 2 copies by August 29. Resettled Jews can take the most necessary household items and clothes and up to 200 Reichsmarks in cash for each Jewish family. 3, in Żagaje, all Jews will be settled in a separate district, which has to be fenced off by August 30th. Fencing off the ghetto district will be taken care of by the Żagadę municipality. Every day, district Jews in the ghetto will be conveyed to work and back to the ghetto by guards. 4. Non-Jewish citizens of the district appointed for the Jews are allowed to choose other locations in the county. If any of those non-Jews who are resettled have to abandon their real estate, they are allowed to choose real estate of corresponding value abandoned by the Jews in Żagadę or other townships. 5. Chiefs and burgomasters are obliged to inform me on the execution of this decree by the 29th of this month, including information on what has been accomplished and how many Jews have been resettled. The burgomaster of Żagadę must inform me how many Jews have been resettled to Żagadę. Jonas Noreka, signature, city and county governor. So, there were about 2,000 Jews and half-Jews that were rounded up and then brought over to Żagadę. And they were all brought there within 1 week's time, very, very quickly accomplished. And within 2 months, they were all slaughtered. And the date was chosen was Yom Kippur. So this was the document that completely turned me around and made me realize that there's a lot more to this rumor than I ever thought. And this is the document that really sort of energized me and made me super focused on the Nazi occupation and what my grandfather's role was. So I was doing a lot of research and writing until 2018. In 2013, I spent 7 weeks in Lithuania. And that's where I talked to just, lots of people who knew him and relatives. And, I pieced his story together and I talked to a lot of Jews as well. And I noticed that there's two versions of the Holocaust in Lithuania. The Lithuanian version is that everything was done by the German Nazis and Lithuanians are completely innocent and had nothing to do with it. But the Jewish version is completely different. And they said that Lithuanians had everything to do with the Holocaust, that it was mostly done by Lithuanians and that they were, very shocked that their Lithuanian neighbors played a role in killing so many Jews. So I think what I tried to do in my book was to integrate these two versions. And of course, the Jewish version is much stronger and more closer to the truth. And that's what I tried to show in my book. My grandfather was in charge in Plunge and in Telšiai and in Šiauliai. And everywhere he was in charge, Jews were being killed. So, and actually there's another memoir written by someone else who was his secretary in Plunge. And he said, my grandfather's the one who gave the orders to kill 2,000 Jews in Plunge. At that time, my grandfather was the comandantas, or the commander, the Lithuanian commander of that area. And Telšiai was like the capital of Žemaitija, or the lowlands. And so he drove from Plunge to Telšiai to Šiauliai often, and they're all like less than an hour apart from each other. So it was not impossible to travel to these three cities. So in Telšiai, about 2,000 Jews were killed, and in Šiauliai, that big region that he was in charge of, about 4,000 were killed. So he contributed to 8,000 deaths under his watch. And so he's considered a desk murderer because there's no evidence that he shot any Jews himself. And this is basically his greatest defense by the Lithuanian government, that there's no evidence that he actually pulled the trigger himself. But, as an American, it's not just, I look at it kind of more globally and with a bigger picture, that it's not just the one who shot the Jews, that it's people who contributed to lining Jews up in front of the gun, that they also played a role, that it couldn't have happened without them either. I hired a Holocaust guide during my time there. I did not even know about Holocaust tours in Lithuania in 2012 and 2013. I had a friend here in Chicago, Howard Walensky, who was a reporter for the Sun-Times, and he's Jewish. And he had known about my project, and he told me about how he had just come back from a Holocaust tour in Lithuania. And I'm like, Howard, what's a Holocaust tour? I never heard of such a thing. And he said, well, it's where Jews hire a Holocaust guide to take them to places where they think their relatives might be buried. And essentially they're looking at a death pit with no names. And I'm like, oh my gosh, Howard, that sounds terrible. And he said, I know, but that's what Jews do. And we go there and we pray over our relatives. And I was really, really affected by hearing the story. And then a few days later, I call Howard up and I said, Howard, I have an idea. What do you think if I hire your Holocaust guide to take me to places where we think my grandfather played a role in killing Jews? And Howard said, oh my God, that's a really crazy idea, but it's a good one. And he got in touch with Simon Davidovich for me. And Simon at that time was the director of the Sugihara House in Kaunas, which is a very famous museum dedicated to Chinua Sugihara, who was the Japanese ambassador in Lithuania, who, despite his Japanese government orders, was handing out Japanese visas to Jews so that they could escape the Holocaust. Anyway, I spent a lot of time with Simas, and he was a wonderful, wonderful person who really opened my eyes to the kind of the Jewish perspective of the Holocaust in Lithuania. And we had become very good friends in the process. I was very sad when he died in 2015, also rather young, like just in his early 60s. But this book would not be the way it is without him. And so I did want to mention him. While I was there, I also talked to this director of the Genocide Center. And the Genocide Center has a really big role in Lithuania. Unlike, we don't have anything like this in the United States. The Genocide Center has about 100, 120 paid historians to look at what happened during World War II. And they're mostly preoccupied with the Soviet occupation, as you can imagine, and really not a lot has been done with the Nazi occupation. I do want to say that the Soviet occupation, was over 50 years, and the Nazi occupation was just 3 years. So if you look at it that way, Lithuanians, really have felt the Soviet occupation much more than they felt the Nazi occupation. But nevertheless, they are called the Genocide Center, and the Holocaust certainly qualifies as a genocide. And we're not sure, if what Lithuanians went through qualifies as a genocide. So anyway, I interviewed Teresa Borowskaite in July 2013, and this was at Simon's behest. Simon Davidovich is the one who urged me to do this, and I was thinking that I was a little scared to talk to her, and I thought she wouldn't talk to me, but he kind of pushed me to talk to her, and finally I did. And I'm in her office, and I'm talking to her about that document that my grandfather signed on August 22nd, 1941. The other thing I need to add is that my grandfather's declared a hero because of the Genocide Center. The Genocide Center is the one who basically gave all the information to the Lithuanian government saying, yes, Jonas Noreika is a hero. Yes, he qualifies as a hero. Yes, President Brazauskas, give Jonas Noreika this Cross of the Vytis. And so it's because of the Genocide Center, they have given their imprimatur to my grandfather to qualify as a hero. And so this is why this Genocide Center is so important to this story and to what is going on in Lithuania concerning the narrative of its role in the Holocaust. So I asked her, how could you consider my grandfather a national hero if he wrote that document on August 22nd, 1941, calling up for the rounding up of all Jews and half-Jews in his region when he was the district of Šiauliai? And her response shocked me And it's also very indicative of how Lithuanians think. And basically, her response was, it's hard to know what he really felt in his heart when he signed that document. And we need to presume that he's innocent before we pronounce him guilty. This is what you do in America, isn't it? So that was her response to his signature on this primary source document, resulting in the deaths of more than 2,000 Jews. And basically, she's not the only one. They're all like this. They all fall over themselves to just come up with any excuse they could about what my grandfather must have felt, or what he must have, really thought, that he must have been forced to sign this document, that, he must be innocent because all Lithuanians are innocent. And so this is how Holocaust distortion works. So I had explained this. So I want to talk about the topic of Zhichoje, which means Jew shooters. And they're the ones that are considered guilty in Lithuania for killing Jews. But and they basically had to be bribed with a bottle of vodka or a bottle of something. They were uneducated, and they were shunned by Lithuanian society. If somebody was identified as a Zhichodes, as a Jew shooter, they were shunned by Lithuanian society. And they're the only ones who are taking any of the blame for this. So, of course, they're the last ones to be involved, because I've given talks on this, talking to students and teachers who teach about the Holocaust, and I asked the question, who's the guiltiest in this genocide machine? And yes, Hitler and the Nazi propaganda are at top. It would never have happened without them. True. But then there was the Lithuanian call for the cleansing of the Jews by Lithuania's provisional government and Lithuania's activist front, which was an active militia of which my grandfather belonged. There were Nazis who wrote orders to segregate and round up Jews. Like that August 22nd, 1941 document, we did find a German original version that my grandfather translated. Then there was a Lithuanian who translated the Nazi orders, like my grandfather. Then there were Lithuanians who identified Jews. Then there were Lithuanians who rounded up Jews. Then there were Lithuanians who guarded Jews in the ghetto. Then there were Lithuanians who distributed Jewish property. Then there were Lithuanians who escorted Jews to the pits. Then there were Lithuanians who just took over Jewish property. And then finally we have these Zhichoje, the Lithuanians who shot Jews. So I put students in groups or teachers teaching about Holocaust in groups, and I asked them, go ahead and have a discussion. Who is the guiltiest in this genocide machine? And of course, when you lay it out this way, it takes them all less than 2 minutes to say they're all guilty. It's not just the Zhichodes. Everybody here played a role in it. So this is what I'm working on, is to open people up to this. So the book is out. Well, in 2018, the book was not out yet. And I had to build up an author platform. And to do that, I created a website. And within days of creating the website in March 2018, a researcher working for Granddaughter approached me, and he said he's working on a lawsuit against the Genocide Research and Resistance Center for Holocaust Distortion, specifically about my grandfather. And Granddaughter is a Litvak, a Lithuanian Jew who now lives in California. He was born in South Africa. And I did not know this, but apparently South Africa was like the only country on the planet to take Jews in while they were trying to escape from the Holocaust. Even the United States wasn't taking in Jews. So that's why he was born in South Africa. And he lost about 100 relatives in the Holocaust, and many of them because of Jonas Noreka. So Grant had been working on collecting information on Jonas Noreka independently of me, working on information about Jonas Noreka. And then finally in 2018, the two of us met, and we couldn't believe each other existed. And we have since become friends, and we've shared each other's information with each other. He shared everything he found about my grandfather to me, and I had to do a massive rewrite of my book as a result. And I shared everything I had with him, and he had to do a massive reorganization of the lawsuit as a result. And then we joined forces. So anyway, Grant has gone through all the courts in Lithuania on this subject and lost every single time. And basically, it's because everybody's in collusion there over Lithuania's role in the Holocaust. So then he took his case to the European Court of Human Rights, and they were not, they're like our Supreme Court, the United States Supreme Court, and they don't have to take every, in fact, they don't take like more than 95% of cases. So they did not take Grant's case. And now he's presenting it in the United Nations. So Grant is not giving up. He's completely self-funded, all of this himself. And so that's where it is kind of on the legal side. Just a few more numbers before I end. I'm a little bit out of time. The numbers are that 900 Lithuanians saved Jews and that they're the righteous at Yad Vashem. And I've been pushing back saying, unfortunately, 2.99 million did not save Jews. And that's really part of the problem of how the Holocaust was so devastating in Lithuania. And like to add insult to injury, a historian from the Genocide Center said my grandfather helped save Jews. So that's what's going on now too. Somebody from the European running for the European Parliament in 2019 smashed that plaque, got up at 4 o'clock in the morning, climbed that rickety ladder, and then smashed it. Took a sledgehammer, and 14 times that plaque came down. But there's now a new and improved plaque that the Lithuanians put up within months, and this is now what the plaque looks like. So this plaque is there on that building. So basically, I am saying that Lithuanians are the 10th stage of genocide. Gregory Stanton of the Genocide Watch Center has come up with 10 stages of genocide, and the 10th stage is denial that it ever happened or that they ever played a role in it. And that's what the story is with Lithuanians now. So, but there's a lot of hope with my book coming out. It's gotten a lot of international coverage, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Chicago Tribune, Der Spiegel, Salon.com. It came out in Spanish, HarperCollins Mexico, and it's out now through Regnery History for about a year. And it's coming out in Lithuania. I'm going to Lithuania Wednesday, and I'm going to be at the Vilnius Book Fair launching my book there. So this is very exciting that it is coming out in Lithuanian. A Lithuanian publisher took it. And so this has given me an enormous amount of hope that maybe people in Lithuania will start looking at the Holocaust differently because of this. It's also coming out in Polish and Hungarian. And the English version is coming out with a new title and a new cover June 7th, and it's going to be called Storm in the Land of Rain, because Dietova means land of rain, and storm is for my grandfather, General Storm, and it's a mother's dying wish becomes her daughter's nightmare. So that's it. That is my presentation, Leah, and I'm sorry I went over about 5 minutes than I said I would, but I can take questions now.
Well, it's okay that you went over first. I'm going to say that. But if you haven't read the book, she goes into so much more detail. It's really a very fascinating process. It's a really heartbreaking process. I can't imagine all of the emotions that you went through. I thought that the fact that you said that you didn't even speak English until kindergarten was very profound. I mean, what a close group community that you had. And as we all know, whether we want to agree with it or not, peer pressure is a real thing. And I can't imagine finding these things out and coming back to that community. So I'm going to start by asking that question. So what was it like to kind of be the one to say these terrible things out loud?
I was terrified when I really, really, part of the reason I was in denial for those 10 years was because I was afraid what my community would think about me and about my grandfather, and I knew it would make Lithuania look bad. And, I grew up very patriotic Lithuanian, always wanting to defend the country. Um, but I think I eventually got to the point where I convinced myself, and I do believe this, that telling the truth is the patriotic thing, and that I do believe it will help Lithuania in the end to come to terms with what happened during the Holocaust, because covering it up and hiding it is not going to help the country. So I have lost friends. Some family have gotten very upset with me about this. I've been called, a KGB agent working for the Russians. I'm still waiting for that check from the Russians to come in the mail. It has not come yet. Um, so, I'm called a traitor to Lithuania, all kinds of things. I did have one death threat, which
Wow.
I did not take too seriously because it came from Sweden. But,
That always helps.
but I've been getting hate mail and lots of hate mail through on Facebook, but Facebook has this lovely feature called blocking. So I've been blocking all that. So that's how I cope with it.
So I think that it sounds like your grandmother probably knew. Do you think your mother knew?
I think, my mom was 2 years old in 1941.
Mhm.
So I think my mom must have gotten as far as hearing the rumor
Mhm.
and then hearing how it's just communist propaganda and hearing how the Russians just don't want Lithuanians to have any heroes. So I think that's where she was at. I think that's as far as she got. I don't think she could have accepted the information that I found. I think it would have been too hard for her. Like it was hard for me, and
Right.
I didn't even know, my grandfather died 14 years before I was born, but this was her father. I don't think she would have been able to handle it.
What do you think she would think now?
Well, if she's in heaven, and I trust that she is, I believe that her viewpoint has completely expanded and has realizes that this is the right thing to do. That's what I tell myself.
I think that's wonderful. All right. I'll move on to other people's questions. So Emily asks, did you find any evidence that your grandfather felt remorse or regretted his role?
No, and I looked, and he was a very prolific writer. And so, he lived until 1947, so still 6 years after, the Holocaust, and he never wrote anything that he regretted playing a role in it, signing any document. He never even wrote that he was forced to do it. So there's a lot of things he could have done, and I found no evidence at all, unfortunately.
Um, Wanda first thanks you, and then she talks about, can you elaborate on the courage that it took to get this book to be presented in Lithuania? I mean, are you nervous about going?
I am nervous about going. I'll be honest. I am nervous about going. I'm assured that my physical being will not be, like I'm not going to be assassinated or something. Like even though I'm nervous that like here we are talking about it,
Right.
but I guess I'm preparing myself for some heckling. At the Vilnius Book Fair when I'm presenting, I'm kind of worried about that. Um, you know, I guess my courage comes from two parts of me. One is the journalist, that wants to find the truth no matter what. And I think my training at Northwestern University played a big role in kind of forming me and shaping me. And then working as a journalist for 20 years really played a big role in all that. So as a journalist, I knew that this was the right thing to do. And then the other big part of me is a practicing Catholic. And I prayed over this every single day that I've been involved with it, and asking God for guidance and help and strength and courage. And so I think all that has helped me too.
Well, I'm glad that you have faith because I think it does help get through these challenging times. Again, I can't imagine the emotional roller coaster you've been on. Somebody asks, do you have any idea why your grandfather was anti-medic so early on? Um,
I
Great.
think, and I can only guess, but I think that he, the way he thought is the way many Lithuanians thought.
Mhm.
I don't think he was alone in this. And I don't even think he was the minority. I think the majority thought this way. Jews lived separately from Lithuanians. They kind of had their separate communities. And I think in general, Lithuanians were farmers and peasants. And in general, Jews were in the cities and, had professional jobs and, maybe were more economically successful. And I think that created resentment among Lithuanians. And that fed into some of their hate.
Mhm.
Besides all the centuries long anti Semitism that was in Europe anyway. Um, and then, communism was a thing already, even in the 1930s, because the Russian Revolution had happened in 1917. And many Lithuanians believed that Jews invented communism, essentially, or that Jews were all communists. And it's not true, but this was the perception. And even though many Lithuanians became communists themselves, but somehow Lithuanians could forgive a Lithuanian for becoming a communist, but they could not forgive a Jew for becoming a communist. And so again, that whole thing became an excuse to call Jews the enemy. And that was just the tip of the iceberg to sort of justify what they wanted to do, because underneath that iceberg that, goes all the way to the bottom of the ocean, that part is just all that anti Semitism that has been there for centuries anyway.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I explain it.
Right. And I think that if we really take an open-minded look, there's anti-Semitism. There was anti-Semitism everywhere. I mean, there was newspaper articles in the United States on, don't apply to this job or you're not welcome at this resort. So it's not anything new, that it just happens to be in Lithuania, and we're talking about Lithuania and your grandfather. I think that it really was everywhere. Another question. What is your opinion on teaching generations like Gen Z about the Holocaust? And how could you use your book as a tool to reach younger generations?
I'm all for teaching about the Holocaust. I'm a high school teacher and I do teach about the Holocaust. So I definitely think it's a very important subject to teach. It can be done in literature classrooms, and it can certainly be done in history classrooms. My book, I have come to realize, is an excellent study on Holocaust distortion and
Mm-hmm.
how that works in Lithuania, because it's got that irony of my grandfather being declared a hero in Lithuania, yet there's so much evidence. And because my grandfather was that chairman of the Cholet district, there's a very long paper trail of what the documents he signed 70 documents connected to the Holocaust. And these are all primary source documents. So it's not just that one document that I read, because that's the most dramatic one, but there's 70 that he played, and he's got a long paper trail. And yet, despite all that evidence, he's still considered a hero. So that's why my book is such a good example of Holocaust distortion and how this works in Eastern Europe.
I would go on to say that your book is an example of being an upstander and searching for the truth and making sure that the truth is heard. But I like, there's a lot of Holocaust distortion right now. So I think that is also a really great way to use it.
Thank
Um,
you.
So Lori says, I so admire your relentless search for the truth and for sharing it with the world. Thank you. Has this changed how you view yourself in any way?
This book completely changed me and completely changed my life and completely changed my identity.
I know I wanted
Uh,
to say, read the book, read the book.
yeah. I started this book as a very proud Lithuanian, and then in the process, I became ashamed of being Lithuanian, and I uh, I feel guilty over what my grandfather did, mostly because he's still declared a hero.
Mhm.
And I know, that Jews don't believe in generational guilt, and I don't think Catholics do either, but you do, I can't help but feel terrible about it. And so part of my talking about what happened is a bit of a catharsis and help, and I think helps rectify this wrong that has been going on.
Yeah, yeah. Eva always said that her sharing her story was healing. The more she shared it, the stronger she was. Um, Emma asks if, which I'm can't wait to hear your answer to this. So Emma asks if you could have one conversation with your grandfather, what would you say to him or ask him?
I don't know. That's a really good
I
question.
know.
I don't know, and I don't know if he would give me the an honest answer, but I guess I really want to know, why did you hate Jews so much? What did they do to you? And how do you feel today about what you did in 1941? And do you think you should still be considered a hero?
Right.
You fought against the communists, no doubt, but what you did with the Jews, I think, pushes the scales down against you being a hero. What do you think?
Yeah. Yeah, it would be powerful to hear him defend himself one way or the other. So, um, so what are you, so you're going to Lithuania on Wednesday. Timing, I didn't know that. But you know, not having been there, not having done it yet, like what is your one big hope?
My hope is that the Lithuanian people will accept this book and take to heart the message that it has. And the message is that it's very sad how Lithuanians played a role in the Holocaust, but it's important to accept it and begin to deal with this trauma. I mean, I know it's traumatic for Jews, what happened to the Holocaust, but this has been very traumatic for me as a Lithuanian too, to come to terms with what my grandfather's role was in the Holocaust. And so I do understand with how Lithuanians are pushing back against this, but I do think that um, finally discussing it honestly and openly and authentically will be very healing for like this is good for Lithuania's soul. Like
Mhm.
I'm doing this for Lithuania's soul, and I think talking about what really happened is necessary. So that's what I hope will happen.
Um, I hope so too. And shoot me an email when you get back. I'm really curious about how it goes. Um, I have another question from Melanie Gibbs. I'm just going to read it all. I understand that members of the Jewish council in the ghettos became informants for the Nazis and did looting to avoid going to the death camps. Do you know if this could have been your grandfather's motivation?
I know that that is used as an excuse because like it's very convenient for Lithuanians to blame Jews for killing themselves. And so this is a really good way to blame to blame the victim.
Mhm.
I'm sure he would have used this as part of his rationale. I'm sure because Lithuanians still use it today. This is still part of their way. And of course, they created the conditions for that Jewish council to act the way they did. What else could the Jewish council do? They had no other choice.
So what's next for you? I know you're going to Lithuania, but then you're working with the gentleman
Grant.
to kind of continue to bring it to light, especially this genocide center. What's next? What are your next plans?
Well, the book is coming out in Polish. It's coming out in Hungarian. I'm accepting as many invitations as I can to speak about the book. My high school has given me a sabbatical this year
Nice.
to promote the book, which has been fantastic. So I have until August. Come August, I have to go back to teaching full time, and that's going to change my life back to the way it used to be. So I'm trying to, talk about this as much as I can until August, because after that I won't have as much time.
Mm-hmm. Well, we wish you the best. Again, if you haven't had an opportunity to read the book, today Sylvia gave you a really broad overview. If you're more interested, somebody said so many fascinating layers, and the book definitely delves into all of those different layers. Simple things like a lot of things I'm remembering from the book as you talked, but one of the things was this piece of furniture that was a part of your family's lore. And when you go back, you find out that this piece of furniture was most likely from a Jewish home. So just again, I do recommend the book. So Candles has it in our library. You're more than welcome to check it out from us, but I'm sure you can find it in many bookstores or of course on Amazon. So not plugging Amazon, but it's an easy place to find books. So thank you again. There's one quick question. Did you have a chance to travel to Auschwitz with Eva? And I'm just going to answer that. No, you did not. So have you been to Auschwitz?
No, I want to go.
Well, we're going this summer. So June 18th through June 26th, Candles is going to Auschwitz. We try to go every summer. Just plug the trip that we spend 3.5 days in Auschwitz and Birkenau learning from guides, but also learning from Eva's story and hearing her voice and telling about her personal experiences. So our website is in the chat box, www.candlesholocaustmuseum.org. You're more than welcome to check us out. Registration for that trip was open until March 11th. So thank you again, Sylvia. This was really enlightening. I really appreciate your time. Thank you for everybody else for spending your Sunday afternoon with us and attending our Be the Change speaker series. Our next event is titled Through Their Mother's Eyes. There will be 2 speakers, one of which will share his mother's story of survival of Auschwitz and Gross-Rosen, while the other will share her mother's story of how she rescued Jews while working for a high-ranking German official. This event will be Tuesday, March 22nd at 6 p.m. It's our first hybrid event. We are going to Zoom and we are going to be face-to-face in the museum. So if you are close, please come join us here. Tomorrow, you're going to receive an email that is a very quick survey thanking you for coming and then asking you to take a part in this survey. This just really helps us make sure that we provide the programming that our audience is looking for. I promise it should take less than 5 minutes. In the meantime, please visit Candle's website to learn more about us. And thanks again for attending today and continuing to learn from the Holocaust. So happy Sunday, and stay safe and stay warm, and goodbye.
Bye-bye.